So let's talk a little bit more about the brushes that are grouped in with the selection brushes when you hold down Control and Shift. And we click on the brush selector icon. There's a few other groups of brushes here. We have the clip brushes, we have the slice brushes, and we have the trim brushes. There's another brush here, the crease curve brush, and we're going to be talking about creasing in a later chapter. Before we go into these brushes, let's select a simpler model so that it's a little easier for us to see what goes on with these brushes. Let's start off with the clip brushes. I'm going to divide my model up a few times so that we get a little bit higher resolution before we do this. Then I'm going to delete lower so that we're just dealing with one subdivision level. I'm going to hold Control and Shift and go to my brush selector icon, and we're going to select the clip curve brush to begin with. This is going to give us the same kind of curve that we got from the mask curve brush, where there's one side of the line that has a gradient, and that's our active side, and the other side is inactive. So that means that the side with the gradient is going to be clipped up to this line. So if I let go of my stylus, what happens is that the mesh on the active side of the line gets clipped or pressed up against the line. Let me undo that. This works great as long as your area being clipped fits within the area that it's being clipped to. If I draw a clip line up and then hold Alt, the clipping will happen on the opposite side from the gradient. If we clip a large area into a small area, then we're going to end up with these thin flags of mesh where the clip line pressed this large part of the sphere into this small area of the sphere. So clip is not cutting out anything, it's simply flattening to the line. These thin areas of mesh where you have front and back side completely pressed together can be really problematic for things like Dynamesh, which tries to keep a watertight mesh whenever it reruns the Dynamesh process. What you'll get when you have thin areas like this is what they often refer to as Swiss cheese, where you end up with holes in all of these flagged areas. So I'm going to come over and just turn on Dynamesh, and you can see the effect of that Swiss cheesing. This can be particularly difficult to fix once it's happened, and you'll often find that you have to go back to a time before you re-Dynameshed in order to fix the thin areas before you can move on. So because this is a curve like our mask curve, we can click Alt once to get a curve point, and click it again to get another curve point, let go, and we can clip to a curved surface. Or we can click Alt twice to get a sharp point, click Alt again to get another sharp point, and it does a pretty good job. Sometimes you may find that you make too strong of an angle for the clip curve brush, and ZBrush will have a hard time dealing with it, and you'll get some odd results like this. If this happens, it's generally better to approach the clipping in more than one step. So I'll undo this, and then instead of doing an angle, I'll just draw my first line all the way through the mesh to get my first clip, and then draw my second line to get my last one. Then I should be able to Dynamesh without a problem. Let's take a look at some of the other clip brushes. Let's start with Clip Circle. If I click and drag on my canvas onto my model and let go, the clip circle is going to clip the rest of the mesh into that circle. So if I turn on my frames here, you can see that this has been pressed into that circle. I can also do this from the center, and let go. And you can see that all of that topology has been pressed into that clip circle. I'll undo that. If I hold Control and Shift and drag another clip circle, but this time I let go of Control and Shift and then hold Alt, I'm going to get the reverse effect. And when I let go, it's not going to cut a hole out because that's not what clipping does. Clipping presses to the edges. So what happened was what was on the inside got pressed into the outside edge of the circle. If I do a clip circle and then hold Alt, but the crosshairs don't go over into the model, what I'll get is a cutout of that area. If, however, I drag this clip circle and have the crosshairs go over the model and then hold Alt, I'll get this behavior. But it's important to remember that the clip brushes don't cut out anything. They just press to one side of the line or the other. In the case of a circle, they either press into the circle or they press the inside to the outside edge of the circle. If we look at some of the other clip brushes, Clip Circle Center is going to have the center feature on in the stroke menu, which means that where I click, it's going to draw outward from that point to do its clipping. Clip Rectangle is just going to be replacing the circular selection for our clipping with a rectangular one. Otherwise, they function the same as the other clip circle brush. The trim brushes often look like they have the same effect as the clip brushes, though they have a completely different process. So I'll hold Control and Shift and go up and select the Trim Curve brush, click and drag to get my curve line, and let go. And we see what we got looks much like our clip curve does when we clip up to the line. What trim is actually doing, though, is it's actually deleting everything on the gradient side of the line and then performing a close holes operation, like under Modify Topology and Close Holes. If we turn on our frames, you can see that the original mesh on the gradient side of the line has been deleted, and ZBrush has filled the space in between with tries. Now, like other curve brushes, I can add a curve point by tapping Alt once and a sharp point by tapping Alt twice. But when I let go, you'll see that the close holes operation doesn't respect the corners when it fills the hole. It just fills the hole with as flat of a mesh as possible, keeping it as simple as it can. Let's show this with a sharp point. And you can see that what we end up with is a blanket of tries simply draped over that hole. If we need to have a sharp line going from corner to corner, then we need to do this in 2 steps. So we can draw out a line first going up, and then another one coming down. Then we have our sharp edge going from corner to corner. If we look at some of the other trim brushes, Trim Lasso simply gives us a lasso selection for our trimming, and Trim Circle is going to cut out a circular area of our mesh and then fill the hole with the close holes operation. If I do this in the center, it's not going to cut a hole in the mesh because it's going to automatically fill that hole with tries. The last brushes I want to look at in this chapter are the slice brushes. So I'll go up to Slice Curve and we'll drag out our now familiar curve line with the gradient on one side. And when I drag this up and let go, it doesn't appear that anything has happened. But if I show my frames, what's happened is the slice brush has cut a edge loop through my model, actually adding topology exactly along the line. And it's created a different polygroup on the gradient side of the curve line. So I can come in and draw out my curve. I can also click Alt once to create a curve line and twice for a sharp line. And we see that we've added a new loop of topology where the curve line was, and on the active side it's changed the polygroup. Polygroups are the topic of the next chapter in the series. The other slice brushes are going to do the same thing. Slice circle is going to cut a circular slice through, and slice rectangle is going to cut a rectangular slice.